150 years, the world has significantly transformed into an urban society. 1 out of every 6 inhabitants of the world in 1900 was urban. By the middle of the century, 4 out of every 6 would be urban. So that's a phenomenal change in the social, the social patterns of how we live. And there are very powerful motivators that persuade people, no matter which continent you are, to agglomerate and therefore migrate to urban centers. In fact, India, which is often characterized as very much an agrarian economy, is going to go through in a 25-year period an unprecedented increase in urbanization of almost 20%, something like 35 to 55. So we're seeing patterns of living very dramatically change. The motivators have been obviously social and economic for the individual. People coming to cities find better job prospects, employers in city find a larger labor pool, social opportunities are better. So these are very natural motivators at the individual level. But equally importantly, infrastructure delivery is efficient in a city. I can put an airport near where you are. I can put a metro rail where you are. I can bring you fiber optic connections where you are. Efficiency in delivery of infrastructure, when you have densification of population, is much easier. And this also is part of this, I suppose, the cycle that we've talked about, the virtuous cycle. Right? You make the investments, you improve the quality of life, you generate output, and therefore it feeds on itself. And what happened with COVID? Now, all of a sudden, urbanization and the kind of urbanization we're seeing has implicitly meant that we have very high density of people no matter where you are. Our trains are overflowing and bursting at the seams. Our buses are overcrowded and bursting at the seams. Our cafes are, you walk through BT terminus in Mumbai and you will be horrified if everybody was potentially prone to a COVID virus. So all of a sudden, this density of population has caused us to say, now wait a minute, is this an ideal environment? Is this an ideal architecture for life? And we all know that COVID is not going to be the last pandemic we as a society are going to deal with. There will be more mutations, there will be more. So the question becomes, where do we go next with this headlong rush into urbanization? The city of Paris, interestingly, has started this experiment. They want to move to what they call the 15-minute city. They want to make sure that they create more localized clusters of urban population and hopefully self-contained localized clusters, which for a software developer or for a data analyst makes logical sense. You have a lot of traffic, whether it's human traffic, activity in a contained area, and limit the connections between clusters. So, for example, the satellite cities. Should Chennai be looking at the creation of satellite cities and therefore address the burden for infrastructure and transportation and mobility, while at the same time managing the duality of densification and efficiency? Unplanned, this is going to be chaotic. In fact, last week there has been further updates that we've lost 2/3 of the farmland in Chennai over the last 25 years. We are having sprawl. We're spreading out, but not in any planned way. And this is leading to transport infrastructure to be chaotic. In fact, the worst, it almost seems like we are on a headlong rush to mimic Los Angeles, which, by the way, is the world's worst city if you want to think about air quality, traffic congestion, and absurd investment, inefficient investment in roadways and highways. So we have to start to first think about, are there better patterns? Are there better architectures for urban living? And how do we align that to the kind of mobility architecture that we want? The second aspect that it causes us to rethink how we live comes with what we've seen with COVID. In 1998, a professor from Cambridge, Francis Cairncross, wrote a lovely book was called the death of distance. The idea was that in a world of telecommunications, mobility demands would very significantly increase, and that there would be an opportunity to communicate, collaborate, interact, socialize at a distance. So distance, there was a death of distance in her perspective. We didn't see any meaningful development of that until COVID hit us. And all of a sudden, 20 years after the book was launched, we have found the meaning of death of distance. I mean, today's conference is an example of the death of distance. This is meant now that we can expect work from home, entertain at home, socialize at home, shop from home. And all of this has changed the patterns of demand for mobility. Not always for the better. Delivery at home has different connotations of demand for mobility. But nevertheless, it again has a demand aspect of mobility that has to be factored into the transformed mobility architecture that we want in a post-COVID world. This also means, of course, that this very heavy reliance on digital infrastructure to substitute for very large fractions of moving people around will bring with it its own challenges. And just like we have to fix and maintain roadways, we will have to, protect and secure digital communication channels in an age where cybercrime and cybersecurity are all major issues. If I now come a little lower in altitude and say, what about specific aspects of infrastructure? While indeed one can address so many topics, water, health, and so on, I think logically I would devote my comments to mobility. This new environment is therefore going to, first of all, ask us to rethink mass transit and public transportation. Everywhere in the world today, public transit authorities have been brought to their knees. It was supposed to be the solution. Every major city with advanced planning systems, whether it's Singapore or London, had been engaged in almost a 20-year exercise to get people out of cars into public transit, and we thought that that was the right solution. We have now got a new challenge to deal with, even as we continue to get people to more sustainable modes. So we've got to find better ways of sharing mobility and yet being safe. One of the options could be a greater use of micro-mobility, because if the alternative was that we all shun use of public transit and we all were to get into our own cars or whatever mode of mobility we have, I don't think that's going to be the right answer. We're going to have unmanageable congestion, not to mention unhealthy air quality. So we're going to find more efficient, more compact, more personalized mobility modes. Micro-mobility, very often electrified, is becoming a hopeful choice in many cities. But always, a mobility architecture will demand a certain heterogeneity of modes. There cannot be a very limited range of options, because we have a variety of needs for people who want to move, a variety of affordability considerations, and a variety of age or access related considerations. So I think we will see a safer public transit, very likely electrified, because there are very significant advantages with it. Very likely more compact mobility, and frankly, this is something even in the earlier session we touched upon this topic, that we've had homegrown solutions that have perhaps been in its own way effective. We have to transform them to be relevant to a new world and to with a newer set of technological possibilities. For instance, something as simple as a bicycle. London is now looking at what's called active mobility. Active mobility is nothing more than saying, please get out and walk if you can, or if you want, take a bicycle and take a bicycle journey. Now, cities in India are frankly used to have a higher dependence on non-motorized modes. we've almost abandoned that. We have followed the Chinese headlong into abandoning bicycles and moving straight on to, in some cases, very non-sustainable personal mobility. So I think the challenge we will face is, again, recreating a new portfolio of heterogeneous solutions aligned to this new reality of aligned to the reality of what we've always been thinking about over the last 2 decades, which is sustainable and affordable, and now added with this additional constraint of saying it has to be safe for people in close proximity or a higher density of people.